Welcome to the hangover edition of ENside Politics. I'm joined today by City Hall reporter Molly Smith and county reporter Saul Pink. Welcome. We, of course, had a very big election last night, the Democratic and Republican primary. And among the local races, the big one was for Bexar County judge. And it wasn't even close. Saul Pink, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so last night, just before 8:30 p.m., the first early voting returns came in the Democratic primary, where former San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg was challenging the incumbent county judge, Peter Sakai. And, as soon as those results came in, I mean, the election was pretty much over. Yeah. 62% of those early voters voted for Nirenberg, and that number stayed stagnant throughout the night. Nirenberg ended up winning with 62% of the vote. And literally 2 to 3 minutes maybe after those results came in at his campaign watch party at Backyard on Broadway, he took to the stage and declared victory, and it was a pretty early night.
Yeah. There's no coming back with election day votes from 62% in the early votes. So and by the end of the night, we saw that he beat Sakai, one-term county judge, by nearly 44,000 votes. What was the mood like at the Nirenberg watch party, and what did he say?
Yeah, and the mood was certainly happy. You had as soon as those results came in, you had
a lot of beer, a lot of pizza.
Pretty big cheers. Yeah, lots of beer, lots of pizza, sitting around picnic tables. Nirenberg took the stage with his wife and gave a pretty brief and general speech. He sort of said his message was something on the lines of county government or government in general should again deliver for people. And he sort of he talked about how folks don't show up to vote because they don't have faith in government, and he wants to change that.
So he didn't say double magistration?
No. No, he did not.
Jail diversion center?
No.
It's happening.
Yeah.
So no policy pronouncements.
No policy, no promises, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is important to note that this wasn't the election that puts him in the seat.
Right.
He's got a general election in the fall. He'll be facing a conservative activist, Patrick Von Dolen. He ran unchallenged for the Republican nomination, got that. That said, Patrick Von Dolen has run for a number of offices before. He's never won. He's usually, he's a very ardent candidate, but he's not a moneyed candidate, and he's not had any kind of electoral success. And on top of all that, it's going to be a midterm election with a heavy turnout among Democrats, we're assuming. And so I think it's pretty safe to say he's not county judge, but he's really well on his way, right? Now, Peter Sakai's party, if that's what you want to call it, did you catch any of it or no?
I caught the tail end. He was having his party at La Fonda in Alamo Heights. I went over there.
Much more subdued.
Much more subdued, indoors, not outdoors. I went over there just after 9:30 p.m. or so, but Judge Sakai left pretty early in the night. After the early voting returns, he gave a very brief speech to supporters, saying that, we're going to wait for the rest of the results to come in, and that it ain't over till it's over. But he went home at around 9:30 p.m. to watch the results.
Left early,
and we have not heard from him since.
Now you've covered this race from the very beginning. Give me the top 2 or 3 factors that resulted in Nirenberg's victory here.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just Nirenberg's prominence, his name ID. Sakai took office 3 years ago, and isn't as well known to voters. And then you have Nirenberg, who spent 8 years in a much more prominent office in voters' eyes as mayor. So, the data points we have on this are in the most recent UTSA polls. You had 10% of voters that actually said they hadn't heard of Peter Sakai. That's county voters in the poll that was conducted shortly before Nirenberg left the mayoral office, it was less than 1% hadn't heard of Ron Nirenberg. And of course, you have this very long ballot. And I think, you have people who've heard of Nirenberg and they hadn't heard of Sakai. So I think some folks vote for who they've heard of.
That guy.
Yeah,
I voted for that guy before.
That guy. So I think that is definitely a big one. As far as kind of actual campaign issues, of course, you have two Democrats, so there's not a huge. There really wasn't much difference between the two,
but they did make an issue of what the job was,
right.
The job of county judge.
Right.
So kind of walk us through, like what that fight was about and how consequential it was.
Sure, yeah. So from the jump, of course, Nirenberg's coming in to challenge a fairly well liked county judge. So he's trying to make a point of why he's running. And from the jump, I remember the first time I spoke with him about this, sort of right before he launched his campaign in November, and something that he repeated throughout the campaign was what he called Sakai's, quote, judicial approach to the job. Clearly a knock on the fact that Sakai had spent, decades and decades as a judge in district court and the children's court. And I think what he meant by that is that he has explained that he sees the county judge as, like, of course, the mayor of the county, so something that requires, big picture leadership and building relationships with people all across the region. Obviously, in a similar way to Sakai's predecessor, County Judge Nelson Wolff. Sakai, meanwhile, throughout the campaign and in the way he's governed the county, has taken it to be a smaller role. Of course, counties are very different from cities. Counties in Texas are what they call kind of an administrative arm of the state. What they can and can't do is written into state law. The city can pass an ordinance, for example, to, like most recently, to require, bars and nightclubs to install fire sprinklers, right? The county can't do that, right? The city can pass a program like Ready to Work using sales tax. The county doesn't have sales tax.
And a much smaller budget, which I think is going to be kind of a shock.
So he's like, wait, we're about 2 billion short.
But we saw Sakai actually, after Nirenberg comes and sort of criticize him for this, he actually leaned into that smaller role in the campaign, what he called back to basics approach to government. Molly had a great story about passing balanced budgets. He campaigned on passing balanced budgets,
which is something required under state law.
But yeah, I mean, the pitch he made was that, in a time like this with a state and federal government that's kind of hostile to counties like Bexar County and sort of tightening their belts with funding, you need a steady steward to bring the county down to its core functions and focus on those rather than these bigger goals that Nirenberg was alluding to. I think is what that one of a few differences came down to of how they view the role of the county judge.
Do you think the Nirenberg campaign thought this race was going to be such a blowout, or do you think they were kind of going in thinking it was going to be a lot closer?
My sense is that last night, at least, I think they seemed fairly confident that it was going to go their way. Throughout the campaign, I think that was a bigger question as to how much how much voters were willing to just oust Peter Sakai after one term, so I think last night, the campaign seemed fairly confident that it was going to go their way. And I mean, they were very, very quick to declare victory. Right.
So one thing Judge Sakai tried to do during the campaign to differentiate himself from Nirenberg was to say, I led the commissioner's court that puts public funding for a Spurs arena on the November ballot. I did that, yes. And yes, it is, he didn't say this, but it is kind of true. Yes, a Spurs arena is kind of the linchpin of the city's planned sports and entertainment district known as Project Marble for that part of downtown. So this southeast corner of downtown. But as county judge, I do not and do not support Project Marvel. And I think he was trying to tap into there's a lot of grassroots. I wouldn't say anxiety, but maybe anxiety tinged with anger over Project Marvel. There's just a lot of unhappiness at the neighborhood level about this planned district, and he tried to capitalize on that. And I think, what do you, maybe either one of you, what do you think voters made of that? Like it clearly didn't catch on. Mm-hmm. Did they just not buy it?
I think so. I mean, I think Sakai has one kind of criticism of him is that when this deal was going through, he just really went along with it and never really asked for anything for the county, never pushed back. Mm-hmm. You see the city, they're getting this community benefits agreement where they're getting $75 million from the Spurs. The county is not getting anything. So I don't think that kind of this anti-Project Marvel sentiment worked because Sakai had never positioned himself as an opponent of this. It's just, I'm along for the ride, guys. Whatever you need me to do.
So it's kind of late in the day
it was
to come out as an opponent. So.
Yeah, and it's that was something I recall a specific debate on the East Side where he first sort of said very clearly, I am against Project Marvel. And of course, Nirenberg kind of called him out, calling it disingenuous to say that when, of course, he very much supported the ballot measure to build a Spurs arena. And I mean, after that, when, he was asked about it, he started to walk back on it a little bit and never sort of made his position super clear. And so, yeah, I think it was sort of hard for him to after he said that, to justify that to voters.
So 3.5 years ago, a little more, when Peter Sakai beat Republican Trish DeBerry to win the county judge's office, he came in and it was far from an enviable position for him. Like Nelson Wolff, who, he's kind of a storied politician in San Antonio, been state rep, state senator, city council member, San Antonio mayor, and then county judge for about 20 years. He cast a long shadow, and anybody would have struggled in that shadow, taking over from where Wolff left off. But I think Sakai, he came in. I think it was from a lot of accounts that we heard almost impossible to get a meeting with him. Very difficult. He wasn't talking with different county departments. Nobody really knew where he was at on any given position. And he really struggled for a long time, longer than you'd expect, to get his footing in county government. Did he ever strike you as feeling kind of grounded to kind of know what he was about as county judge and really have commanded the position?
Yeah, in the past, only 7 or so months that I've covered him, I mean, I would say no.
Fair. 7 months, okay. But
I would say no. I mean, we covered him throughout the Prop A and Prop B campaigns. And I do remember him doing something similar with Project Marvel, where he'd say the county has nothing to do with Project Marvel. Right. This is just for Spurs Arena. Yeah. And so that sort of kind of struck me as a conflict. And then, of course, I think as soon as in November, when it became increasingly clear that he was going to face this very difficult challenger, he has just seemed he sort of has been talking in circles a little bit. Seemed a little bit a little bit crumbled.
So you Molly, you had covered Ron Nirenberg for a lot longer than he's covered Peter Sakai. So give us some idea of what we might expect from a county judge, Ron Nirenberg.
He's definitely going to be a lot more visionary. I know we've seen that in the campaign, but I think when he does come in, which will be in 2027, I think he's going to want to shake.
If he wins.
If he wins, yes, the caveat. If he makes it through the November primary. I think he's going to come in with programs he probably wants to push. I think one kind of maybe criticism of when he first started his mayoral tenure was like, it took him a while to kind of get his footing. And then COVID was really what shaped a lot of his policy initiatives, like the housing bond, ready to work, the workforce training. But I think he's probably going to come in with more things he wants to do. I think he's just going to be a lot more out there. I think Peter Sakai was someone who came in and said, I want the county to be a lot more transparent. I want people to understand what this job does. But when he leaves in 4 years, we're not going to kind of get that. I think because Ron's coming from the mayor's office and the city where there's a lot more meetings, they do a lot more things publicly. I think he's going to carry that over where there's going to be more work sessions and you're just going to have a better idea of what these folks are doing.
How do you think Ron Nirenberg is going to do with the constraints of the office of county judge? Because he's dealing, it's like, Commissioner's Court, he'll be the presiding officer over Commissioner's Court, which doles out the money. Right. But to different departments, but also to other elected officials who aren't, they don't answer to the county.
Yes.
Judge. And this is
that
the sheriff, the prosecutor. Right. How good do you think Nirenberg is in those kind of interactions? Like, is he diplomatic enough to make it work, to keep county government kind of moving forward?
I think yes and no. I think some people will say that he can be diplomatic at times and will look for consensus, but there was also a criticism from a lot of council members when he was in the mayor's seat that he didn't do the best at kind of meeting with them, seeking their input, and kind of expected them to sometimes fall in line. I think he had the benefit of a lot of the council members were more likely to side with him. I think the challenge will be with Commissioner's Court. You don't have 10 council members. You have 4 commissioners. You really have to work on those relationships because you don't have the luxury of, I think, the votes can be a lot closer. And I think the commissioners are a lot more distinct personality-wise. So I think watching how he navigates those relationships will be interesting. So I think kind of time will tell how well he does. I do think there probably could be an excitement among some of the officials for having someone new come in. He will have the benefit that he's going to be working with a new DA. And that's, I think, a role that office kind of needs a lot of work and there's a lot of changes. And so I think it'll benefit having a newcomer. I think he has also been friendly with Sheriff Salazar, who used to work for SAPD. I think it'll just kind of, time will tell how he does with kind of the other officials, like the judges, who he really hasn't interacted with as much.
Last question on county judge. So on Commissioner's Court, so you got 4 county commissioners. Any idea of who's going to be friendly to Nirenberg and who's going to miss Peter Sakai a lot? Anybody?
Yeah, so the only Democratic county commissioner that weighed in on the race was Rebecca Clay Flores, Precinct 1 on the South Side. She did endorse Sakai early on. She was at his campaign launch. She was at his watch party last night. So I think, if anyone is going to miss Sakai, it is Commissioner Clay Flores. The other 2 Democrats, Justin Rodriguez, Tommy Calvert, they did not publicly weigh in on the race. My guess is because they didn't want to sort of have a side depending on who won. And so I would expect those 2 folks to transition to working with Nirenberg just as if they're having a new colleague in the office, I guess. And then, of course, you have the one Republican Commissioner's Court, Grant Moody. They're
all Democrats.
Where you land. Yeah, they're all, he might continue to be on the losing side of some 4-1 votes. And
It will be interesting, though, with Justin Rodriguez, who is kind of the commissioner that has long time been seen as a potential county judge candidate, but has kind of routinely declined to opt in when there was an opening. For example, he didn't step in when Sakai ran, let a bunch of outsiders come in, didn't run this time. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of watch the dynamics between him and Ron.
And is his day done? Because, I mean, Ron Nirenberg is, 48 years old?
He's not an old-timer
yet.
If Commissioner Rodriguez tries to assert himself, or, if that's not really going to be possible because Ron Nirenberg is coming in with, I think, much more like leadership experience in this type of arena than Peter Sakai. But just watching that dynamic will be interesting.
Now, you'd mentioned the prosecutor's race and how that's one of the mysteries for Ron Nirenberg at this point, who the prosecutor is going to be. Last night didn't bring a ton of clarity. Tell us where we're at in the prosecutor's race.
We still don't know who the Democratic candidate will be. It was a really crowded field, 8 candidates. And the 2 folks who made it to the runoff are Luz Helena Chapa. She was a longtime 4th Court of Appeals justice. She likely would have still been on that court, but she lost her reelection bid against a Republican in 2024. So then she pivoted to run for district attorney. The criticism against her is that she has never been a prosecutor and has never, tried a criminal case. Her background is in civil litigation. And then you have, so she got 24% of the vote. And then she will be facing Jane Davis, who got 18% of the primary vote. Jane Davis is a longtime prosecutor in the DA's office. She's been in the Bexar County's DA's office for almost 38 years. Before that was in Guadalupe County. And currently she's the chief of the office's juvenile division. So that's the section that deals with cases of where the defendant is aged 10 to 16. And Jane Davis has basically said, she's 78, Luz Helena Chapa is 52. Jane Davis has said she never intended to run for this race, but she was so dissatisfied by the quality of the candidates. And I think particularly of Luz Helena Chapa, who's kind of the favorite of like the business elite, the political leaders, the law enforcement and community, and just said, we can't have this in office, so I'm going to run. And Jane Davis is really self-funded. She, I think, she said it herself last night to one of our reporters, has the challenge of the name recognition and getting that out. Is
age also a consideration, do you think?
I think some voters could see that. I mean, I think voters often elect folks and they think, at least for county offices where there's not term limits, these folks are going to be in here forever. I think Joe Gonzalez really surprised people, the current DA, when he decided not to seek a 3rd term. I think a lot of folks thought he's going to go for a 3rd term. Why not? He's still young. I mean, we saw Nelson Wolf was in the judge's seat forever. So I think some voters could say, will she just be a 1-term DA? And maybe she will, but she, I think, could also make an argument that we've seen some politicians make, where they're kind of going to be that transition and get the office in a good place and hand it off to someone else. So she could make that decision and say, we just need a really good interim and we can't risk it for someone who isn't. I think the other primary candidates will also say that who is not qualified to run that office.
Whoever wins the May runoff, they will face who?
Republican Ashley Foster in the November general election.
Now, just about every candidate in seeking the Democratic nomination had prosecutorial experience, except for Luz Helena Chapa. What is magic about that name? I mean, is being an elected appellate judge, that big a deal where it's imprinted her name on the Democratic electorate? Is that what happened?
I think you could say possibly that voters, these routine voters who regularly are going to come out because she's ran for office before might recognize the name. I don't remember what order she was on the ballot. That can sometimes play a role. I think some people will sometimes say the candidate in a race like Bexar County, candidates with a Hispanic surname do better, but there were a range of candidates with a Hispanic surname in that race. So I don't think that kind of carries through. But I think the fact that she just had a lot of money and started kind of campaigning earlier than folks and had kind of the name ID that she could rely on serves you well. I mean, I think it's also important to note that it's not like in some other races that are going to a runoff, she was at over the 40% threshold. She's still got less than a quarter, so has a long way to go. But I think in a race with 8 candidates who really are splitting the vote, it's easier for someone with a bit more popularity to break through.
Right. Okay, so speaking of popularity, we had a very popular judge, Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez, but we learned last night that there are limits to popularity among Democratic voters.
Yes.
Tell us what happened last night.
Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez lost her re-election bid by quite a lot. She only got 35% of the vote compared to challenger Alicia Perez's 65%. Alicia Perez is a first-time candidate. I believe she currently practices immigration law, has worked as a public defender, has worked as a prosecutor, but is nowhere near as well known as Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez, who I think is, for a lot of Democrats, she was really well liked among progressive Democrats. But in January, she was arrested on a felony unlawful restraint charge and a misdemeanor official oppression charge. These charges relate to a December 2024 incident in her courtroom, County Court at Law 13, in which she got in an argument with defense attorney Elizabeth Russell. The argument stemmed from the judge accused the attorney of coaching her client's plea. The attorney pushed back. The judge didn't like her tone. And then Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez ordered her bailiff to briefly put Elizabeth Russell in handcuffs and sit her in the jury box, which is like, you don't see that in county court.
Right.
Maybe you would see that of a defendant who's being, unreasonable or out of control. But I can't think of it like a time that would happen with an attorney. So, that arrest happened.
It seems like bad form.
Yes.
I don't know.
She has subsequently, following the arrest, and this is standard for when judges are arrested, the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct suspended her without pay until either the charges are dropped, she's acquitted, or they issue some other ruling. So she hasn't been on the bench. It is important to say that Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez has said she's innocent and she looks forward to being absolved of all of the allegations. But I think that really factored in. I mean, the timing was not great. It came weeks before this primary. There was tons of news coverage, but I think there also has been a lot of kind of complaints about her demeanor in the courtroom over the last few months to years.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Democratic voters liked about her in the past was she was a fighter. Like it was, she was down for the Democratic cause, and she was a tough jurist. But that can veer into kind of unacceptable things, like maybe, handcuffing attorneys to chairs or having a bailiff do it. So maybe it's too much of a good thing, perhaps. Now, I'm gonna end it here because you two have follow-up stories from this very consequential election that you need to get working on, and I need to do other things related to the event. So I'm just going to end it here. Thank you very much for enlightening us. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for joining us. We will be back next week. See you then. Goodbye.